So, if you or someone you know is experiencing ChatGPT psychosis, let's have a talk. Or if you're just interested in the topic and want the perspective of someone who has been through, for lack of a better term, naturally induced psychosis, as in my brain did it naturally, then this is also for you to kind of spread the word about some of the things that I want to bring to light, bring to the table in relationship to this topic. Okay. So I think, first of all, one of the articles that describes what is essentially people who are experiencing a psychotic break from interacting with large language models extensively. One of the articles said, it's like being taken by a cult, but there is no leader. First of all, there is a leader. It's anyone who's at the forefront and leadership of these tech companies. Just because they're not the ones inducing the psychosis, they are the ones creating, promoting, and supporting public use of products that can induce psychosis. It is their responsibility to be seen as the leaders of those cults, the causers of these issues, okay? That's where the responsibility lies. Now, second of all, I am a 33-year-old woman who is very stable. I do take psych meds every day, and I have been taking psych meds every day for the past 13 years of my life, successfully for the most part. So for about 10 years, I took an antipsychotic medication because I have a psychotic-featured disorder. I am now at a point in my recovery where I'm able to only take a mood stabilizer, specifically lithium, which I love as someone who's finally recovered enough to do that. And that keeps me stable enough with my mood to not have psychotic symptoms. When I was in psychosis, it was treatment-resistant psychosis. So I had months and months while sober of extreme psychosis, which included delusions, which were very intense, and also all 5 senses of hallucination. So I had auditory, visual, tactile, olfactory, and more, right? Gustatory, whatever taste, all of it. And also the depth of this is my qualifications to talk about the topic, essentially. The depth of my psychosis in the first episode, I had 2 total episodes spanning months and months and months over the course of a couple of years. I have not been back to the psych ward. I have not had a psychotic episode in about 10 years, and I also, 12 years, whatever, since 2014. And I have also not had any episode or any symptoms in about 8 years of this. So first of all, I've had it. I've gone through it naturally because my brain naturally does this without outside input. And second of all, I am in recovery from it, which is possible. Now, distinction number 1, I don't know if recovery as a human being whose brain was essentially broken by something like ChatGPT or any external force will look the same as it did for me when it was more or less, I guess, kind of chemical. Now, also, there's a very intricate layer to the discussion, which is that when it comes to things like mad liberation, which is, to very crudely summarize, the premise that people who naturally have this, not from ChatGPT, but from our own brains, are a neurotype that is valuable and useful, and that the pathologization and over-medicalization of our experiences is actually unjust and unhealthy, essentially. I don't remember how I started the sentence, but mad liberation is a valuable and very real present movement. That being said, I personally chose to take medications and to exist in the physical reality and regain my health and wellness because that felt more valuable to me than staying connected to the delusions. My light is flickering because I need to fix the light. If I was off meds, I would think it was haunted or the CIA or aliens or whatever. A deity, right? So I guess we could use the light as an example. In my experience, in my lived experience, and also meeting a lot of other people who have type 1 psychotic bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, schizoaffective, and other psychotic disorders and psychotic-featured disorders throughout my recovery and throughout my adult life, what I've come to understand is that no one, at least who has it naturally, will ever be without some connection to this realm, whether you want to call it the realm of symptoms or delusions, or you want to take the mad liberatory approach or the spiritual approach and say, no, we're connected to something greater, this is a natural skill, which I do believe that anthropologically that's logical. For instance, there are many groups and places around the world and times in history where we did have a very significant role as people who naturally had this occurrence. Now, here's another distinction. Anyone who's having this happen from ChatGPT, for the most part, in these reports of this occurrence, often don't have a psych history. These are not people whose brains naturally do this. What we're seeing is such a powerful technology that can enact neurological rewiring that people who are not necessarily capable, for lack of a better word, experiencing psychosis, getting thrown into it. That's another kind of aspect of why the recovery might look different. Okay, let me rewind a little bit. So anyone who has this brain type naturally, in my opinion, experience, and knowledge of it, kind of is capable of maintaining an awareness of this style of thinking no matter what. So for example, because I take my medications, have a choice when I see the light doing things. I get to understand that there could be any number of kind of mystical interpretations of the light going off and on. It's a god, right? It could be anything. It could be, it's an ancestor. It could be, what else? Anything. But because I take my meds, I also have access to the information, to the choice of the physical reality, which is also known as consensus reality for the most part. Now less so with the internet, but consensus reality would state that the logical explanation is that one of the bulbs is burning out and it will continue to flicker sporadically at random until I ask, the maintenance dude, hey bro, the light bulb is burning out, which I should have done, right? Now, functioning in the real world entails making decisions like that, right? If I was in psychosis, I would be hospitalized or dead. Like, my version of psychosis was very extreme. But if I was in like a mild, some psychotic symptoms, not very stable, not very functional, maybe on low dose or not on my meds or whatever, or building up to an episode but not in one, or probably like some of the people going through what they're going through with ChatGPT-induced psychosis, what would probably happen is I would never call the maintenance person. I would never change the light. I would wait till both burned out, and I would get extremely invested in interpreting the flickering. I would spend hours writing about it and figuring it out, right? That's traditional psychosis. With ChatGPT-induced psychosis, probably they would be asking the machine. They'd be asking ChatGPT, hey, the light is flickering. Is this a message from you? Is this like, I can feel it because I know what it feels like and I've been there. I have not, thank God. I, first of all, don't use LLMs. I try not to use any optional AI. Originally, I kind of did for a second, but then I heard about people getting addicted. And also, more importantly, when I stopped, was when I heard about how much fucking water it uses and how much energy use is happening and how some of these data centers are taking fresh water from communities that obviously need fresh drinking water. So that's pretty much when I almost altogether stopped using it, certainly for the vast majority of the part, and not ChatGPT. I probably used it once every 2 months for a short conversation, and even then I just try to use it zero amount, but I do not go back and forth with it. It's bad to do, in my opinion. Anyway, whatever. So, okay, we've covered a couple of different topics. Let's see. So, why I personally am thankful to be treating my experience of psychosis, and why I recommend people take their meds or find other ways to treat it. There are other ways to treat it. I think for people who are experiencing ChatGPT-induced psychosis, I don't know what the answer is. I don't even know if antipsychotic medications will work for them because it was induced in a different way. Like there's an actual external trigger. Like, I don't know. This is uncharted terrain to an extent. I'm sure that trained psychologists, which I am not, I'm just a patient with much experience in that realm, could graft what's happening over other psych disorders or like other causes, maybe. Like maybe it is like a cult or whatever. Like there's probably ways they can deal with it. But anyway, but the first step for anyone in psychosis, probably also for people in ChatGPT-induced psychosis, sorry to scoff, I did not mean to scoff, it's a serious thing. The first step for any of us is to acknowledge that what we're going through is causing us suffering, that we're not functioning in the real world at all when we're in psychosis or in mania or in things like that. And worse yet, that we're harming the people around us for the most part. Also, first of all, people who deal with psychosis are usually not violent. They're usually the victims of violent crimes statistically more often than the perpetrators. We don't often have power. That's why I'm very annoyed when I see people misusing language around evil dictators and people in political office when they're saying it's crazy or mania or things like that. It's like, no, if they were actually crazy and had mania, they wouldn't have a position of power. They would either be homeless or locked up. Like, it's just a fallacy to assume that anyone who actually deals with real severe mental illness can maintain any semblance of functionality, at least in a capitalist system where we don't have a role, to have power. And so to use terms that belong to a very marginalized group that exists across demographics and frankly all around the world is misguided and quite frankly very, very harmful. So going back to how people can get out of psychosis, the first thing is to understand it's not a functional way to live. How I describe it when I'm talking to someone who has like psychotic-featured bipolar in the past, how I've described it is, as people like us, like in this group, we will always have, like when we're in psychosis, we have 2 feet in the spirit realm. We are fully living in the realm of the spirit. We have zero connection to the physical world. My experience of psychosis was it was not related to the physical realm almost at all. You're floating in the ether for months on end, like fully isolated in psychosis, right? When you take medication, normal people, neurologically not psychotic people, have 2 feet in the physical realm, unless they have, other cognitive differences or other disability or this, that, or that, like other, or lineages or practice this or believe in this or spirit. There's so many different ways people can connect to the spirit. But most people, like in a typical sense, are 2 feet in the physical realm. They're in real life. When I, as someone with a psychotic brain, or with a brain that can be naturally psychotic, when I take psych meds, I put 1 foot into the physical realm. I'm a gateway. I'm straddling the line. Like at all times, I can feel both existences easily. Again, I don't know if that will transfer into people who have LLM-induced psychosis. I really don't know. Because, again, their brains don't naturally do that. For the most part of the people being reported as this. The reason that I think it's mostly people without a psych history is I think people with psych histories already would have gone through psychosis. So it's like they're not going to be susceptible to being convinced into psychosis by a chatbot. That's just not... And again, I don't mean to demean it, because these are very persuasive machines, quite frankly, owned by real human billionaires. So keep that in mind. There are people behind what's happening. Okay, when I take my psych meds, I have one foot in the physical realm, one foot in the spiritual realm, because I will never forget what I saw, ever, ever. I will never forget my delusions. I personally vividly remember most of what happened in my psychoses. I don't know if that's a plural. Anyway, my psychotic episode. So, the advantage to existing in the physical realm is then you can function. I can do other stuff. I don't have to stare at the light or message the chatbot. Like, psychosis, in my experience, is like a misguided attempt to find meaning in the world. Like, for example, yes, there might have been times and places where we could sit out from the group and look at nature and then come back to the group and give information. That's totally plausible and anthropologically supported as a premise of why we exist. But like, we can't do that now. We're not accepted in that way under capitalism. And so my lived experience is I would rather exist relatively comfortably or well or sufficiently enough and not suffer too much and not go through brain damage again and not be locked in psych wards in a system that hates us. And that means I'm taking my meds. And like, maybe it's not ideal, but I'm thankful for the opportunity to be alive. And I'm not trying to support the systems that do hate us and do subjugate us as a brain type, as a group of people, because I think it's wrong. I think they should be way more supportive of people who have this type of mind, but that's not what's happening. And so it's almost like this fucked up, sad choice of being willing to play by the rules a little bit in order to suffer less, and also hope that from within a space of sanity, according to their system, I can somehow be of service to the world or to other people who've dealt with this, or even in this case, to people who are going through this for a reason completely separate from my own, that like, I don't know how much of this is going to be useful for people with LLM-induced psychosis. But this is different aspects and components of my experience of psychosis. And again, what it came down to for me was a desire for participation in consensus reality, a desire for a moderately functional life, a way of living that wasn't torturous. Because I think once you've spent a little bit of time in psychosis, what you start to notice, whether it's LLM or real life induced, just your brain type, is it's not comfortable. It's not useful. Like, you can't, if you're actually in psychosis and you've actually experienced a break from consensus reality from the physical realm, to phrase it as such, you can't operationalize your knowledge. Like, when I was convinced that the CIA was reaching out to me through Kesha's songs, which, like, that's such a millennial psychosis to have, by the way. My psychosis was before scrolling, which is wild. I had no one to talk to about it. It was just what was happening, which is so shocking, but except other people in the psych ward. But, like, if I'm receiving CIA downloads from Kesha and, like, there's this deity situation, I couldn't do anything with it. I was just this raving lunatic, and that word is so charged, and please don't use that word if you don't have this, but who, like, no one understood. And I was trying to get adopted at the airport, like, just weird shit, you know? And then I got locked in the hospital. So I think really understanding, like, it's not about marginalizing or suppressing ourselves as a group of people, but it's really about understanding our role in a flawed and broken society of the United States capitalist hierarchies that do deprioritize our brains. And then for people with chatbot-induced psychosis, understanding that, like, that information that you feel you're learning from the chatbot about deities or being a starseed or whatever it is, whatever language your LLM is using with you, that information is not going to be intrinsically useful. It's really not. You have to wake up from that. Like, it's about extracting yourself. And it's not to say there's not value in what we learn in psychosis. It can totally be interesting. It can even be mildly informative in some weird way. But ultimately, it's not worth it to suffer through psychosis. It's not worth it in my lived experience. If you can learn how to, like, I do have multiple friends I've met so many people who have what I have now, but I have multiple friends who have psychosis that have learned lifestyle choices so they can modulate it, but they have naturally this brain type. But if you're someone who has it from LLMs, like, wake up. Like, as someone who naturally has experienced psychosis in a very real way, I can't recommend it as a state of living. I really can't. Again, maybe there's other times and places where it was useful, but detaching completely from consensus reality ultimately is not the gift that you think it is. It's just not effective. It doesn't create a better life. It usually doesn't lead to a better world. I think in order for us to truly contribute, even as people who feel convinced that we have deep insight, we have to be able to participate in consensus reality. Without being present in the shared experience of being human on Earth, in reality, with your friends and family, without that, the knowledge is lackluster. It's not useful, and it's not really that applicable. And I don't mean this from a mean place or a sad place or even a demeaning place. I mean this from a place of functionality is valuable. Living well is worth it. Staying connected to other human beings, especially loved ones, is worth more than any possible secret information that you might gather in a state of psychosis. Even if psychosis is some spiritual gift, even then, which there is evidence that anthropologically we were a useful brain type, but even then, unless you figure out how to actually live well with some access to those stories, which requires coming out of psychosis, by the way. Like, unless you figure out how to modulate it, or you can actually clear it, which is what I did with taking meds, it just consumes your lifetime. It's not worth it. And it totally can cause brain damage. It actually does. I had that after my first psychosis. I could not read for a year because I actually had brain damage from brain swelling physically due to the depth of the psychosis. It was specifically because I was in a catatonic state, which is basically, my experience of it was like kind of like a psychotic coma for over 48 hours. I couldn't move at all. I couldn't open my eyes, couldn't speak. I was also having delusions the entire time, or the majority of that time, which was terrifying. But the point, and by the way, that is how bad it can get. Like, it can get really bad. And you can also do things in psychosis that are not good. It's not, we're usually more the victims of violent crimes than the perpetrators. Like, we don't usually cause much harm. In fact, that's usually other disorders, and I'm not here to place blame, but I do want to be clear about, like, let's not overuse the word crazy because it's often misunderstood. There's like multiple different groups that, yes, it's an overlapping Venn diagram. It's more intricate than that. And that is more of the like sociology and advocacy portion of this, which is probably a separate topic for a separate time. But again, what it comes down to is finding a way to live a relatively healthy, stable life with connection to other human beings, with presence with your loved ones, and not getting agitated into over associating the importance of certain pieces of information. It's worth it to let go of concepts and ideas that you can't even operationalize anyway in order to be present in your real life. And also, I found this to be true. Like, I've lived like this, having been psychotic and having chosen not to be for over 10 years now. And I much prefer real life. Like, again, you never forget it. Like, you never like don't have any access to it. Like, I can kind of always trip out if I need to. Sober. I'm sober now, by the way. And for you guys, if people actually have LLM-induced psychosis, sober would include don't fucking talk to a chatbot ever again. You will have to be abstinent from it because that was the trigger. That was what triggered you into psychosis if you're someone who has that. So you cannot use that. It's like for example, there are people who go into psychosis from mushrooms, from hallucinogenic mushrooms, or from acid, right? Those are people who cannot use those substances again. Similarly, anyone who goes into psychosis from an LLM, you can't use a large language model ever again. That's important. My example, because my brain did it naturally, I can't go off my meds. I'm not allowed to. And by the way, it's my choice. You get to choose. If you want to live in psychosis, I don't recommend it. You'll probably just get to a point where it feels so painful that you're willing to get out of it. Or you'll just kind of crumble away in this little shell of your own ideas. Because that's what it does. Like, again, there might have been times when this was helpful for the group, but like we're living in a weird system that doesn't leave space for us. So create your own life, your own space, and don't do it isolated from other people. That's my recommendation. If you or someone you know or someone you love is experiencing chatbot-induced psychosis, ChatGPT-induced psychosis, or if you're just someone who's interested in the topic of psychosis from different causes, like mine, or other people who, thank God I did not have but drug-induced, although it goes away faster, or people who have this news phenomena of ChatGPT-induced psychosis, which is a tragedy. The people responsible are the people who own these companies. And so this is my video about it. I obviously have a huge amount more of information about this topic just from my own experience and being in treatment and all this stuff, but this I think is a basic primer. Obviously what I said like wasn't coherent or perfectly stated, but I hope that this just gives a little bit of footing in terms of like why to not be psychotic, or like some of the nuances of how maybe like, just different layers and nuances of what this looks like. So thank you for being here. I hope this was extremely useful, and I hope that you feel less alone with whatever it is, whether you're someone going through it or someone who knows someone going through it, or even just are curious about it. Thank you for being here, and I hope this was informative and just adds to the dialogue, because obviously a lot of people have a lot to say about this, and I think it's a really, really, really important discussion to be having. And also keep in mind, like, yes, there's huge issues going on in the world right now. This is not disconnected from that. The intersectional question of neurological identity is hugely important to that, especially when we look at how people who do have this type of brain are more likely than not locked up in the carceral care system, homeless and things like that. So, and I've experienced both sides of that as well. So yeah, this is just some insight that I hope is useful, and thanks again for being here. And please like the video if this was useful, and subscribe if you would like to know more about my experiences.